All right, so we're going to shoot this review, but first we've got to open up the computer. We have to make sure that the program's opened up as well. Got to plug in the mic, make sure we plug in the camera so we can be seen. The mic's got to be plugged in so we can be heard, but we also have to make sure that the program doesn't have the mic muted because we really do have to be heard. And then we've got to make sure that we have our editing software ready to go. And if there are any sort of mistakes or anything like that, we got to reshoot those. We got to make sure that the review is good or the AI is going to take over all of the nuclear weapons in the world and annihilate all of us. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Davey Death Ray here, back with another movie review. And this time around, we're taking a look at Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Directed by Christopher McQuarrie and starring Tom Cruise, Haley Atwell, Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, and about 25 other people. So let's dive right in. For my overall thoughts on this one, guys, I just want to get it out there right away. Traditionally speaking, I'm not the biggest action movie fan. You know, I grew up in the 80s where there were all sorts of these kinds of movies. They were a bit more cheesy and, if I'm honest, I think a little more fun back then, whereas nowadays we do these gritty action movies. They are grounded, or at least try to be grounded. This movie takes some pretty big liberties. We'll get into that. But I would say if you enjoyed the previous Mission Impossible films, you're going to love this movie because it's very action heavy, and we'll get into the specifics later. But one thing I want to put out there for you guys right now is this movie has so much exposition. The first 30 or 40 minutes is almost all exposition meets a greatest hits of things you've seen in the previous films. And there are scenes where, you know, Ethan is in one location, his team is in another location. They're both describing their plans and their ideas to different people in these different locations. Each person is taking a turn saying a sentence for the plan. And it gets to the point where, to me, it almost felt like comedic or like a parody. And then this just keeps on happening. While they're explaining their plans, you're getting, you know, visuals of what the plan is going to be like in action. And then you actually have to see it happen in the movie itself. So, you know, a big con for me right out of the gate, even though this movie was a lot of fun, there was just way too much exposition for me. It is exposition city. And it kind of reminds me of some of those movies that I've seen on Mystery Science Theater 3000 that do way too much of that. But I think for a general audience, especially in a movie that's 3 hours long, they probably just want to make sure that none of us lose the plot. And for me, I was sort of like, okay, can you just show instead of tell? So that's the big takeaway I have on my overall thoughts. But I did have a fun time with this one, and let's get into the specifics. Real quick before we get going, please like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning down below. So with the story on this film, it follows up Dead Reckoning, which was originally entitled Dead Reckoning Part 1, but they scrapped that and just called this one The Final Reckoning. So there is an AI program called the Entity, and essentially it is working to gain power of all of the nuclear missiles on planet Earth, at least from the 8 biggest countries. And if it does this within 3 days, there's going to be total annihilation. So Ethan and his team have to gain the trust of multiple people so they can stop this Armageddon from happening. Now, getting into the acting here, it's pretty dang good. I think it's one of the stronger suits of the film. Even though there are like 30 characters in this movie, everyone's doing a really good job. And you know, you got to give it up to Tom Cruise. These movies are near and dear to him. You can tell that he cares not only about his dramatic performance, but also the physical side of the performance with all of his stunt work that he's put into these movies. And you can also tell that he only wants to work with people that can really deliver that top-notch quality product. And you get that throughout all the performances here. I will say, though, the only negative side about it is that he really is the standout for me. It's just Tom Cruise. Everyone else shares screen time, but even in a 3-hour movie, when you have like 30 characters, you're getting tossed around a lot, and there are some charming performances from the ancillary characters, of course. Yeah, they are for sure there, but I would say the main takeaway here is Tom Cruise's dramatic performance. With the direction and cinematography, this movie does a really good job, and I would say as an extension of that, the editing is awesome. The action scenes are edited so well, which to me really sells the visual side of the action. And especially in a day and age where these kinds of movies can sort of seem run of the mill, I would say that what Christopher McQuarrie and his team put together behind the camera and in the editing room really makes these movies stand above the rest. Now, when it comes to the sound design and music, I mean, I love the Mission Impossible theme. I think it's great. There's something that's just so timeless and catchy about it. And they find a really cool and creative way of integrating that into the movie and giving it little bits of new flavor for sure. And the sound design, holy cow. I mean, if the editing is what sells the action, and especially those fight scenes, visually speaking, the sound design is what sells pretty much everything, all of the action. The fighting, the epic moments, the set pieces, it's all sold by the sound design, which was immense and incredible. I saw this movie in IMAX and I was just completely surrounded by this beautiful sound design. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a music head and I love audio so much, and this might sound crazy, guys, but hear me out. I think audio is arguably more important when you're watching a movie, because you could close your eyes and imagine what something looks like, but imagining something sounding better if the sound isn't good or if the sound is there is so much more difficult. And I know I've talked about liking the acting, I've talked about liking the direction and the editing, but I think the sound design is one of the more impressive elements of this film that really sells the action for me. And with the effects, I mean, I guess the best thing I could say about the effects here is I didn't really notice them. So, you know, all of the action that's practical looks really good, and anything that was touched up or done with CG or anything like that, I really couldn't tell. I would imagine, you know, there's a bit with the submarine that you see in the trailer. I would imagine a lot of that, at least seeing the submarine, is something that was digitally created, you know, computer generated. But as far as the action goes, it all looks very believable to me. So, you know, if they're touching things up or, you know, replacing people with digital imagery, I really couldn't tell. I thought they did a great job. I mean, to me, the sign of good visual effects is not noticing, so they must have knocked it out of the park here. To wrap things up with my closing thoughts, guys, I actually had a pretty fun time with this movie, and, you know, I can totally be a jerk about run times, and at 2 hours, 49 minutes, I was really worried about this one. And yeah, the exposition is super heavy-handed, didn't really get on my nerves, but got to the point where I was like, okay, it just seems like they keep on telling me what's going to happen here. But the action is so much fun, and it really is just a thrill ride. It gets your heart beating, and it's super fun. You know, I try to, when I rate these movies and when I talk about them, I try to sort of grade them on a curve within their own genre. And I would say when it comes to action movies like this, I would give this one a solid 4 out of 5 stars. So if you're a big fan of action films, especially the Mission Impossible films, then you're going to want to check this out in the theater and watch it on IMAX if you can. But I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. And please remember to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share the channel with someone who you think would dig this kind of content. I'm going live all the time, so make sure that notification bell is hit and you won't miss a thing. Before we sign off, I want to give a huge shout out and a big thank you to every single one of our Patreon members, as well as our awesome group of YouTube channel members. I know I say it all the time, guys, but I really couldn't do it without you. I appreciate every single one of you so much. Thank you for stopping on by and checking out my review of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Make sure to poke around the channel and you just might find something you really enjoy. So until next time, I've been and will continue being Davey Death Ray. Take care.